afternoon, everybody. My name's Karen and I work for a company called Find Memory Care. We specialise in enhancing environments to make them suitable for people living with dementia. The way we started our work is theoretically the way you need to consider when you're making changes to your environment. And hopefully today, for those of you who are just starting, I'll give you some good ideas of how to get going. For those of you who are more advanced, hopefully I'll give you ideas on the next steps and how successfully you can do that. But for you, the same as us when we first started, there's certain things you need to take into consideration. And for any environment, you need to understand dementia and how it affects people. So when you talk about dementia, there's a lot of commonalities. So for instance, we know that people have memory issues. Certainly early stage it's those recent memories, but as the condition progresses, obviously it becomes more concerning. But in addition to that, one of the other major issues people have is their ability to communicate. So from the initial forgetting the odd word, to actually not being able to follow a conversation, to not being able to make themselves understood or to be understood. And if you're in an environment that doesn't help you do that independently, you've lost your independence, you lose your confidence, you've got no dignity, and actually it's just in existence as opposed to a life. And that's what we try to do. We try to change the environments to take things like that into consideration. But other issues, of course, are things like your visual spatial awareness issues. So we know people have difficulty with distances and things like stairs. We know also that things become quite flat, you can't see in 3D. Therefore, in a bathroom, for instance, everything's white, it's all flat, and it becomes quite a hazardous risk to your health, because if you fall in the bathroom, you're going to hurt yourself. So we know about those type of things, but what often isn't mentioned is that you can lose your ability to see in colour as well. So you can't see, you can't judge your distances, you can't recognise what's going on, and actually you lose all your paler colours first. Then on your primary spectrum, you'll lose your reds, your blues and your greens, leaving your reds and your yellows as the last colours that you'll see and recognise. And some of our strategies from the beginning have included reds and yellows, and there's very certain reasons for that, particularly for things like toilets, where you need to be able to find it very, very quickly and be able to use it. And if you haven't got that colour strategy, it becomes very difficult. We also know people get very confused, very lost, and we try to take all those issues into consideration. But in addition to that, although it's not an older person's disease in its entirety, we do know that the older you get, the more likely you are to develop it, and there's a much higher prevalence in people over 85 that have dementia. So they have age-related conditions as well. So as you age, you lose up to 6 inches in height. For a lot of ladies who might have had 3 or 4 inch stilettos most of their life, all of a sudden doing flat shoes or slippers. If you do have Alzheimer's, you can develop the curvature of the spine, which means you can't actually look up. And of course, we're living longer. We've got this wonderful NHS now that looks after our health. So we have heart attacks, we're dealing with heart conditions, we're dealing with strokes, with diabetes, and all these things, which you may wonder why they affect the environment. But quite simply, straight away, they're probably on a lot of medications to cope with it. And the more medication somebody's on, the more impact it has on the well-being. So again, it does need to be taken into consideration. And it's also worth knowing a little bit about the evidence-based research that's available. I'm not going to bore you with science of it, but there's just a few that I think are worth knowing for those that you don't know. Stirling University did a research project about 10 years ago, and they looked at a lot of things. So they increased the lighting, they improved the flooring, the signage, the toilet areas, but the results were quite amazing. They reduced falls by 70%, they reduced agitation and aggression by 60%, and they reduced incontinence by 50%. So they were really, really good figures. And then another piece of research by somebody called Ebola said that 90% of challenging behaviour is caused by people in the environment. And when I mentioned the symptoms of dementia, I didn't mention aggression, because actually it's very rarely a symptom. The agitation and the aggression are caused by people who don't understand them and by an environment that is not conducive to their independence. So the positive on that is that we can do a lot about it. Another piece of research, quite recent, that I think certainly for me is key, because we are developing so quickly now, is that 79% of a person's time in care is spent doing nothing. They're sitting down. It's all sedentary and idle. That's no good for anybody's health. So telling somebody to sit in a chair from breakfast until tea, you can understand why come 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the agitation levels rise, why the sundowning issues come into being. It's just not right. So we know that there's an issue with exercise, but we also know that there's a strong link between exercise and depression, and half of the people in care homes will suffer from depression. 1 in 4 of those will need treatment. So again, we need to make it very enabling to keep people active and stimulated, to give them a good quality of life. To give you an idea, if I can, of how these link. A little bit like the old world in action figure this. But if we take for an example of wanting the toilet. If you can't find the toilet, I'll show you. If you can't find the toilet, you're going to be quite distressed. You're going to be agitated. If you're agitated, you're increasing your risk of slips, trips and falls. If you can't find the toilet, you're incontinent. If you're incontinent, you're going to be quite distressed. Therefore, you're going to be upset. If you fall, you're going to have the pain. If you can't find the toilet, or you're on more medication, you're likely to have an impact on the nutrition and hydration levels, because you might be frightened of having another drink for fear of not getting to the toilet. So if you reduce your hydration, you're going to get nauseous, which means you're more likely to fall. You're on more painkillers, which adds to the medications. Do you get the idea? Although you can be talking about one particular issue, actually they have a knock-on impact in everything. But exactly in the same way it does that way, if you get your toilet strategy right, actually those will fall into place as well. So where did we start for people who are quite new to this? Have we all seen that sign before? Yeah, we all know what it is? Just think for a few seconds, you've got no memory, you don't know the environment you're in, and you know you need the toilet. What does that sign actually tell you? Would you feel comfortable as somebody 80-year-old going into a room with a picture of a man and a woman on a door? It is a universal sign for a toilet, but dementia is a universal issue, so it doesn't work. One of the first things we did was we designed a toilet sign. All our signs, as with a lot of things, are based on a set of principles, and it's all based on the research that we did that I've already mentioned to you. So we know a lot of people associate really well with colour. So we need colour. There's a lot of evidence saying it's contrast rather than colour, and most of that time I would agree with it. The only one I don't agree with is your toilets. Because to me, if you need a toilet, you need it there and then. And that's where potentially your reds and your yellows come in, because people can see it very quickly. So whatever colour you choose for your toilet signs, you don't want to use it for anything else. So if somebody can associate with that colour, they know, they find that sign or they find that colour door, they know where they need to be. Not everybody can read, but a lot of people can. So it's not about taking dignity away from them. You just need to make sure that the font is correct. It has to be a capital letter at the beginning and it has to be lowercase then throughout, because we read by image, we recognise shapes, and if you do it in capital letters, people can't read it. That's why you would never read a novel or a newspaper in capital letters, because you couldn't do it, you'd get fed up, you couldn't scan. And it's exactly the same for people with dementia. You want to give them the most opportunity they can to maintain their independence, and that's using all the right features. Images work brilliantly well. A picture of a toilet tells you what's behind that door. And it's not just about people with dementia, because you have people where English is a second language. You have people with learning disabilities, people who've had a stroke. There's lots of different people who will benefit from seeing that image on the door. It should be non-reflective, because with the best will in the world, we'd love to have great lighting. We don't have. So if the lighting is poor, you'll get reflective. And again, toilet can look like to let. So you think you've got to the toilet and then you misread the sign, and the agitation then comes into play. So that's really important. It's all, I say, non-reflective so you can see it. And the last thing, other than the shape, which helps some people, we can't do anything about, we can only advise you, and that's the level that you put it at. And all your signage, in fact anything in a dementia care environment, should be 1.2 metres above the ground. Anything higher, the best sign in the world won't work because people can't see it. And when you get into the toilet, of course, you've got to be able to use it. So you need contrasting coloured toilet seats, contrasting coloured handrails. Again, you need bright lights and you need clear floor. Without those, you are increasing people's agitation and the opportunities of them falling. So for me, that will always be the starting point in any care setting. You have to make sure people can find the toilet and use it for as long as possible. You might think this doesn't incorporate it in the environment, but for me the dining experience is as key to anything, because again, like I've said, if you're not eating and drinking, you're not going to be well enough to actually use the environment. So providing good quality food, of course, on contrasting coloured plates so people can see it, because you eat with all your senses, you don't just eat with your taste. You have to see it, you have to be able to manipulate it. The easier it is to see, the more quickly you're going to eat, the more you're going to eat, and the more you're going to eat when it's hot. So it makes good sense to use contrasting coloured plates so you can use it. Make sure your dining room is a dining room. You don't want music playing because people can get easily distracted. You don't want pictures of horses and flowers because they have nothing to do with the dining experience. You need people to be focused, really focused on what they're there to do. Moving on from there, our next, that I'm just touching on very briefly, we looked at the environment and getting people to use the environment properly. So you get up in the morning, can you find the dining room? Can you find the lounge? Can you find the activity room? This is where your colours aren't as essential because you want people to be walking. So they're going to be walking down a corridor, they don't need to find it urgently, they just need to know when they get there what's behind the door. But that particular picture shows you a before and after. The first one, as you can see, is very dark. It's got no discernible features whatsoever. If you don't have, well, to be honest, even if you don't have dementia, you wouldn't want to go down there because it doesn't feel safe. The second picture is like the lighting's been increased. There's an awful lot in there that gives people orientation aids. So there's the use of the coloured doors, there's the memory boxes, there's the reminiscence pictures. So people can associate with all of those. Just one quick mention of the memory box. They used to be our most popular product, and then they took a little bit of a nosedive in a way, but they've come back into their own again. And that is because people now understand more how to use them. It's not a picture, it's a working document. So if you have somebody coming into your care home who thinks they're 70, the things they will recognise at 70 are totally different to what they will recognise when they go back to thinking they're 60 and they're 50. So it's the way you do your care work, you do your life story work, portrait of a life, whichever one you use. The information that you gather from those fact-finding, those engaging environments with them, that's the information you need to put in the memory boxes. But then we go now more onto how we enhance environments, and it can be quite a touchy subject. False environments and the use of murals. These are two examples. This is a home I went to when I first went there, and they've got a full-size double-decker bus on a wall in a lounge. It's false. It can do nothing to contribute to a positive environment. If somebody wakes up, which they do, they're sitting opposite this, or they were, you sit up, you're not feeling too good. Are you inside? Are you outside? Are you waiting for a bus? Did you pass out? The confusion speaks for itself. And that's not just because you've got dementia, because if you were fast asleep and you woke up to see a double-decker bus coming towards you, I think it might make you think for a few seconds where you are. So that is an inappropriate use of a mural. We use murals as destination points. There's somewhere for people to go. Because as things stand at the moment, a lot of care homes will have a lounge. If you're lucky, you might have two lounges, but you can't differentiate between them. So you're not giving your residents choice. And choice is a human right. So you should have a choice of where they go, what they do, who they spend the time with. And murals are a brilliant, easy, simple way of designing a home to incorporate that. So we took the double-decker bus from this wall and we made it into a flower shop. And when you go there, they just started there, there's just a few flowers. But generally speaking, as you can see in the bottom corner, we actually supply that with a full flower stand. The idea is then, somebody goes down, if they like flowers, they'll take some. It's great for you as care staff because you now know they like flowers. But there's an awful lot of things you can do with that. You know, the royal wedding last year was a prime example. You've got the build-up to the royal wedding. What flowers did you have at your wedding? What flowers do you think the bride's going to have? What about the buttonholes for the men? In spring, it's now, you shouldn't have roses in a flower display. It should be your daffodils and your tulips because it's great for orientation. In the summer you would change it. But again, you're not Toby, you wouldn't want daffodils because you're giving mixed messages. So we can supply a lot of the product, but you have to use it properly to help people understand where they are, where it is, and what they can do. But that's a prime example of a bad change to a good change. That's down a corridor, so enhancing care environments. If it's a dining room, make it look like a dining room. Simple as that. Whichever way you're walking down the corridor there, the doors are usually open and you can usually get a drink in there. So you're orientating people towards something where there's something for them to do. It's not a dead end. And it looks good. They look really, really good. Bruce Lodge is in Stockport, and they've got this wonderful big entrance area that we've made into a marketplace. I can't show you it all, but this is a little bit of it. But this is the original cafe area. And as you can see, it was a little bit of a dumping ground. That was what it was like when we finished. But actually, when you sit in there, when you look round, you've got a sweet shop, you've got a reminiscence shop, you've got the bus stop, you've got a flower shop, you've got a hat shop, and you've got the post office. It's a proper market environment. And the activity coordinator now uses this as her base because she can see what's going on. So no longer do people go with the trolleys and take people with the cup of tea in the morning. They're encouraged to come for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the cafe. And it's normal. It's what we do for years. You go shopping and you go and have a drink and you have a chat. And some of the positive feedback we've had about areas like this is, for instance, a professional going in to do an assessment. Prior to this, it was in a bedroom. So you've got a stranger sitting opposite you, asking you questions. Now, you go and have a cup of coffee in a cafe and you chat. Totally different, and the results speak for themselves. And it's the same with the bus stop. You know, people say that the bus isn't going to come. We're supporting people with dementia. We're not talking about people being stupid. The majority of people will know that that bus is not going to come. They don't expect it to come down a corridor. But if you're looking for someone or something or somewhere, it's a perfect place to gravitate to. And as a carer, if somebody goes there quite regular or they're going there at the same time every day, again, just like talking to somebody in a cafe, all these people will probably over the years have gone to the bus stop. You talk to the person at the bus stop. So you're not questioning, there's no interrogation, it's just a general chit chat, and you are far more likely to get some proper conversation out of somebody, putting them in that kind of environment. And that was it on the opening day, and it was just amazing. The atmosphere was just wonderful, and it is used all the time. It's a really good example of what you can achieve. Wynyard Woods is one that my colleague has been working on, and this has taken it to the next step a little bit, in that they're fortunate they've got a bit more space. So we have a lot of people talking about false realities, particularly academics, and they'll say, you know, if somebody's going to the shop, you take them to the shop, so you take them to post a letter. That's the biggest false reality of all time in my view, because you don't have enough care staff to do it. So suggesting that that's the right way round, it just isn't fair on anybody. You physically couldn't do it. So the next best step is to get people within their little community to be able to do it for themselves. If you can't have shops, but you've got a little bit more space, there's no reason why you can't have proper shop windows. So LED lit, you can make them so that they have things that people can buy. So the first one I did was like a toiletry shop. So when they wanted new hair shampoo or soaps or whatever, the staff went to the shop with them and they could choose what they wanted. So no, it's not going down to your local spa, but it's your next best thing. The second one there, we've tried to, that's a bit of a mix. So you've got the shop at the end. Generally speaking, that would be open. It's obviously closed for the picture. But you've got the pillar box, so you can post your letters. You can go inside to interact in the shop. You've got shop windows on one side, and in keeping it bright, we've got an external sign on the other. You have to be careful using the external signs because, again, they're not real. But always, at the very least, you have railings on them. but they do work well and people do love them. Is there anybody from the hospital in here? Oh, cool. 2, 3, that's good. I specialise predominantly in hospital environments, and there's just 2 examples here that are absolutely amazing. I worked with Acomb Garth in York, which is a mental health unit for men with dementia. This was their dining room, so you've got the 2 pictures there beforehand where it was just a blank magnolia room. And then you've got the room after where we've made it into the Minster Cafe rooms. And it is in the middle of York, hence the picture of York Minster. There was one of the windows there, you can see it was actually going onto a broken fence. So we've put a distant view of York on there. So it's still light enabling, it's not blocking the light, but it helps people with orientation. They do know that they're in York. The first time I went back after I'd done this one, I was greeted by a lady in reception and she went, "Oh, you did the murals, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I went in there yesterday and there were 6 men just sat chilling." She says, "I've never seen anything like it." It was just amazing. And then at the other side of the unit, there was this big empty space that we've made into a marketplace. And it's a music shop, a newsagent's, a dining room and a grocer's. You can always have something to eat in the dining room, at the table. You can always find a newspaper. There's always music playing, and the grocer's is more like an activity place. So they do have, the guy that worked there, Darren, he's taken a lot of Pringle packets and covered them to make them look like tins of food. Because the idea then is if somebody likes, fancies something that's there, it's a really good clue if they come to you with a tin of peaches, that perhaps it's those peaches that they like. So it's good in that way. But they also have things like all the jigsaws and the activity things. So again, somebody can go and have a look. If there's something that interests them, they can take it away. Within the first 2 weeks of installing these, the Trust did some research and they reduced agitation by 79.6%. So that's men who are there because of the regression, because they need the meds medicating and sorting. They've actually reduced it by nearly 80%. And the other hospital I'm doing a huge amount of work with at the moment is Bolton, and that's an acute trust. So slightly different. So they've now got cafes and quiet rooms on 10 of their wards. So they're clearly working really well because they're rolling them out. But again, a lot of the wards now have a cafe area. And it is a cafe. So we've done the murals, we've put the bar units in, but on the morning it'll be tea. On an afternoon they might have reminiscence exercises, so they'll go in there and have little chats. I know of one lady that went in with a mum and got very, very emotional because the mum hadn't interacted with anybody for months, and she was actually engaging with the activity that was going on in the cafe. So the perfect positions to put them. They're only a tool. I can't say put this in your home or put this in your hospital and it's going to work miracles. What I can say is we are giving you an amazing place to make an amazing difference to the people that you care for. Tommy Whitelaw opened these. Some of you may have heard of Tommy Whitelaw. He's Tommy on tour at the moment. Scottish guy who cared for his mum who had vascular dementia. He went and opened these, and now when he does his tour, he actually incorporates it in because he just thinks these rooms were absolutely wonderful and just wished he'd been there when he was caring for his mum. And that's a quiet room that we did. Some of the wards need more of a de-escalation area because they're dealing with people who have drink and drug-related issues, so they need somewhere calm. But they also need places where they can speak to relatives and such like. So it's different from the cafe, but again, very, very well used and very popular. And the lighting in that room in particular, there was a tiniest little light, but we put the skylight in, so it looks like the sky. It's made a fantastic difference. People love it. It's becoming very popular, but it also gives that room so much more light than it would have before, which again is really key for people with dementia. Originally, when people talked about murals, they used to talk reminiscence rooms. And to me, a reminiscence room is something that's dark, it's all dark wood, it's uncomfortable furniture. The reminiscence is what you do in the room. You need the space to be engaging, you need it to be bright, you need it to be recognisable. It's then what you do in that room that brings the memories back. And that's a prime example. So in summary, hopefully I've given you a little bit of idea for those who are starting and for those who are at the next stage. But in summary, when you're looking at enhancing your environment, you need to be thinking of it in lines of making it independent and making it giving people confidence, because if they've got the dignity as well, which is key. primary considerations, I've covered off those with you. So we are looking at reducing falls, reducing incontinence and the agitation, and keeping up good levels of hydration and nutrition. That's where we're up to as we stand at the moment, but as always we do have other things on the go, and there's two particular things that people on our stand have been more than happy to discuss with you today. One of them is that we're developing some windows, some LED lit windows. The key for us, the problem is we don't just want to put a window out there so somebody can think, I like that, let's buy it. If it's wrong, we want to talk to you because we want to make sure if you're using these that you're using them correctly, whether be in cooperation with the murals, whether they be taking you down a journey to get you outside. There's lots of reasons you can use them, but you don't just want them to look pretty because they can confuse. And the other thing some of you might have heard of, we're from Yorkshire, and there's a home in Yorkshire that's just launched a train station, the train carriage. My colleague's working quite closely with that particular home, and although they've got a maintenance man who's done an awful lot of the work. Again, we've got the design in progress at the moment, but we're working on it because we want to make sure it is right. Because again, what we don't want is to offer something that creates a false reality. So just like the bus stop, you meet people at the bus stop. If we're going to do a train station, it's a place where you will meet people. It's not a place where you would expect a train to go from. And again, the carriages, they're fantastic, but you don't want to be saying to somebody who's not at late stage dementia, come for a ride on a train, because you're going to confuse them like mad. If they know it's not real. And I've seen that with something as simple as an empathy doll, where somebody said, do you want to hold the baby? And you can see the sheer confusion in the person's face. Is it a doll or is it a baby? Well, you'll be doing the same with the train if you don't get it right. So we're working on it. If anybody has anything like that they want to talk to us about, we're more than happy to discuss it with you. But we won't make it for you until we know it's right for your environment, because we take such a pride in what we do. Thank you for your time.